Hello there comic book fans, it's me, Mark, GhostCritic, here with a comic book review video. I think it was about 9 or 10 books this week on my pull list, which I showed you on my Wednesday video, and now it's time to hear what I thought of them, going from the ones I least liked right up to my pick of the week. And it certainly was a roller coaster of a ride, because there was dips and highs and peaks and swirly whirly all around the place type stuff going on. And kicking off with this starting to become a little bit predictable to say the least, but it's the Punisher, Becky Cloonan. Becky. I just don't understand how 16 issues on, Becky still does not get the character of the Punisher. Because this, I mean, Frank Castle has had his moments where he's been like super involved with the Marvel universe as a whole, and has had his little moments within like big events. Much like, I think it was, is it Dark Empire, or it came just after Secret Invasion, and he got involved with all that. But generally, Punisher keeps to himself. He likes to stick to the shadows. He doesn't want anyone, to know he's been there, or he is where he is. But Becky's got him front and centre, to the point where he's literally standing on a red carpet getting his photo taken at like an opening screening of a new movie, and it just doesn't feel right. I mean, let's not go with the whole Punisher car that he still seems to have, this big huge car with the Punisher logo slap bang on the bonnet. It's just not the Punisher, and I can't wait for the next writer to come on here. Hopefully they will have done their homework. Hopefully they will have a better grasp of the Punisher and his history, and his character as a whole, because Cloonan just doesn't have a clue. The story, it kind of picks up from the whole drug thing he took down, and this character called Face that took way too much of the stuff, and it's kind of mutated his body now, where he is, I guess, nigh on indestructible, as we see in this issue, where buildings fall on top of them, huge explosions, but nothing seems to be able to kill him. So we're at this point right at the very end of the comic, where Face, on the billboards of, I guess it's Times Square or something like that, has kind of thrown down the gauntlet for a fight to the death with our Frank Castle. I'm clinging onto this comic by my fingernails, just waiting for, someone did tell me, I think it was Rosenberg, to take over from this and make Punisher great once more. So that was the first one. Clearly not a firm favourite with me, but Punisher, it's just one of those characters that I always like to collect. Moving on to Cullen Bunn's X-Men Blue, issue number 12, and this kind of wraps up the latest storyline with the Goblin Queen, Madeline Pryor, who has been using versions of X-Men from, I guess, different worlds, and kind of turning them into the evil kind of versions of the X-Men. She calls them her Hexmen. And we've all had their backstories. They've all come from really broken families. It's kind of like the dark path taken from our regular Earth 616 universe. So we have, there's Colossus, there's Nightcrawler, there's Storm, but they've all kind of got kind of twisted names on their original ones. But this is basically the story of Hank McCoy, who we've seen over the kind of last 11 issues, using magic rather than the science that we're more used to him using to kind of help the team. And this clearly has backfired greatly, as he has helped Madeline Pryor, the Goblin Queen, open up a portal so that all her other versions of herself in the other dimensions, in these other worlds, can come together and kick ass, kick villainous ass. But of course it's not going to happen, and the team all come together. We have betrayals from the Goblin Queen's own XMen in the form of Storm, and it sort of brings another new character into our kind of regular Marvel universe, and that's in the case of Storm, called Bloodstorm. She kind of gets left behind in this 616 universe, so she's now we've got two Storms running around, and we'll see if she either stays with the team, and there'll probably be the whole kind of character of her. Is she bad? Is she good? Kind of an Emma Frost kind of vibe, but with Storm. It was alright. It was general kind of average X-Men banter going on, but we'll see where we go from here, as the team are still loving Hank McCoy the Beast, but realising he made an absolute fool of himself, and he's got a lot of making up to do. Moving on to DC, and it's The Flash, issue number 31. And again, this kind of wraps up the latest storyline, Bloodworks, where we have The Flash trying to take down his latest villain. I can't remember his name now, but basically this guy who used to work in the mortuary, who's trying to cure a blood disease that he has kind of mutated into this villain who can control blood, and it's up to the Flash to take him down. And so we get this really big kind of fight scene across the city as Flash tries to take down our villainous character, and it's alright. It's okay. It kind of obviously leads on to the next storyline, where the Flash does want to be rid of this rather darker side of the Flash that he's been using after being in the negative force, and he decides that it's almost kind of a Spider-Man vibe, where he wants to give up being the Flash, and he hands the ring to I don't know if it's called Kid Flash, but he tries to offer him the ring and say, look, until I sort this out, this is yours, I'm not worthy of it. But the kid goes, look, you've pulled me out of some sticky situations. I realise now where you're coming from, and I shouldn't have been as angry as I should have been with you. And that harkens back to a storyline much earlier on. And they kind of, there's almost a team up where the roles are reversed now. Barry isn't training his kind of new protege, it's his protege training him to be a better Flash again. But the twist here is that Barry's kind of day job as the kind of forensic detective, he's not been fired, but he's been transferred, and he's off to the prison that is part of the Flash universe. Just trying to remember, Iron Heights, that's it, Iron Heights. So we're going to see him in a more confined space, because obviously it's a prison, and how easily he's going to be able to solve whatever next adventure, perhaps without having to use his Flash abilities, because it's going to be more difficult to keep that secret identity under wraps while being within the kind of the walls of this big prison. Interesting stuff to come, I hope, from Joshua Williamson. The Flash has kind of it started off really strong for me. I was really excited for it. It really helped me integrate into a little corner of the DC universe that I wasn't particularly familiar with, but introduced me to a lot of characters, Flash's history. But then after that big peak, it kind of sunk down and into this whole negative force vibe with the Flash that I'm not particularly intrigued by, because there is going to be a moment where he just gets rid of it and he's back to being Flash, and I want him back to being the regular Flash, and all colourful and exciting and not so glum. Not so glum. We're going to stick with DC. This time it's the start of a new storyline and new creative team. It's Wonder Woman, part 1 of Children of the Gods from James Robinson. And this, I think you need to know a little bit about what else is apparently going on in the DC universe, because I was kind of lost with this issue, as we have the elements of one, Darkseid's daughter. I wasn't even aware he had one, and the fact that Darkseid seems to have regressed into a child again, and he's trying to gain some power back to, I guess, grow back to his adult state. And here we have Hercules being brought into the storyline, which is that harkening back to like the New 52 storyline of Wonder Woman, which I didn't read. I'd heard a lot of people talk about it, but it was more about the gods and Wonder Woman being part of that pantheon. Are we kind of harkening back to that? I'm not sure. So I did feel a little bit lost with this storyline, just kind of picking it up as I go along. It wasn't the strongest start I felt for James Robinson. Purely, maybe that I'm the one at fault here because I'm the new reader, but as we've said many times before, this issue or another issue down the line is always someone's first issue, and you've got to kind of help them, especially at the start of a storyline. You've got to kind of help them, especially if it's kind of like a jumping on point for someone who's gone, oh, it's the start of a new storyline, I'm going to jump on here and hopefully I'll be alright. I don't think with this you're going to be, unless you've been reading a lot of DC and you know what the hell's going on here, because quite frankly I don't. Now, I was kind of disappointed with this month's instalment of Lazarus X+66, this 6-issue mini-series, while the regular artist on this book, Lark, probably tries to catch up and do his best work on the main title, as we still have Greg Rucka writing these stories, but we have a different artist for each one. But it was the story that was kind of, let's say, predictable for this, and wasn't and hasn't been as exciting as the last 2 issues. As although it's picked up characters that we saw way back right at the very beginning of Lazarus, we kind of drop back in on them now and see how they're doing. For those of you who haven't been reading Lazarus and don't know what Lazarus is about, there is this kind of almost post-apocalyptic type universe where the kind of royal families or governments don't run the countries any longer, and it is these kind of 4 or 5 families, and they run their own areas of I guess it's kind of America, I would say, and they have what are called the Lazarus, which are like super assassin army type people who they use for assassinations and leading armies and the like. And the kind of population of the Lazarus universe, it's segregated into, it's kind of like 3 separate areas, I guess. You have the family, which run the whole thing. Then you have the serfs, which are basically the servants who live a quite comfortable life. They have, you know, nice places to live and such like, and they've got the proper jobs like the doctors, they build houses and all sorts of stuff like that. And then you have the waste, which is just the people literally are the waste. They're living kind of like hand to mouth. But there is an opportunity for those that are kind of in the waste to be lifted up into the next level of the serfs. And if you are chosen that, your family come with you as well, and they kind of live a much more luxurious lifestyle. And it's in this issue where we pick up these two characters who, I think it was their daughter, it was either their daughter or their son, kind of got picked to become one of the kind of servants of the family, and so they kind of got lifted up as well. But they're still having their kind of doubts about how free they really are. Now they're living this almost decadent lifestyle that they're not used to, but how free are they really? And there is this element that there is a revolution, there is an underground kind of rebellion against the families, and it's up to these two to kind of decide whether to trust the people who are kind of, you can see, are already part of the rebellion. So you have this kind of meet up with what is meant to be the whole group are coming together and, I guess, plotting against the family, but is broken up by a family, and there's obviously that moment where they think they're going to get sent back down again, but they have the stamp of approval from the family, so they kind of get a free pass to just let go. And there's this kind of guilt from them for living such a wonderful life now, when they know what it used to be like and how many millions of people are suffering because of, I guess, not only their lifestyles but obviously the family above them. So, but the way the story went, it just felt very kind of predictable and kind of average for what has been a great little kind of mini series. Hopefully this will just be a blip on Greg Rucka's storytelling, because he does write great stories. This one just didn't really do it for me. Moving on, as we get higher and higher on my enjoyment list, we have Saga, issue number 47. Crazy looking character here, which definitely is front and centre. And I've spoken about this over the last couple of issues of Saga. As much as we get introduced to so many of the characters that are living in the Saga universe, we don't get to see many of the characters that we've been introduced to. It's more firmly about this family, Alana and Marco, and I kind of miss those characters that we've been introduced to in the past that clearly have a big part to play in the storylines. And I just like, maybe instead of just kind of like, oh, let's pop back into this life's character for an issue and then go back to the family, maybe a few issues of one of these more B or C list characters that are just as important. But here we have, we're back to seeing what's happening to the Will, one of the bounty hunters, who, and this is another thing that really kind of confuses me about Saga, because I know they do these jumps in time as we see Alana and Marco's daughter Hazel kind of grow up. It's difficult to know and remember what's happened to these subsidiary characters, because we have the Will, who's been captured by this character here, and he's looking worse for wear, certainly as he's kind of strung up anyway, in a kind of captive position, but he seems to have put on quite a lot of weight. He's got a bit of girth going on around his waist, and he's all kind of bearded and haggard and obviously been tortured. And we find him having his mind and his memories being pillaged, and we see moments of his life as this character torments him using these memories. So we see him reliving a kind of fight alongside his lover, the Stork, and he lets basically slip that about Alana and Marco's baby, which everyone's trying to find and everybody clearly wants to destroy, because the two different kind of species, I guess you'd call them, should not be together. They are at war with, the races are at war with each other. So to have two of them procreating and making a kind of hybrid of both races is seen as obviously incredibly blasphemous and wrong. But there is there's a lighter feel, despite the fact that, you know, the will is being tortured, but there are moments of humour and lightness. Lying Cat gets thrown in there again with his great lying line, but now that he's kind of let slip about Hazel, this character who we find out is the lover of someone that the will killed back on Sextillion, again, which goes back to quite a while ago in this series of Saga. But it's nice that they pick up past storylines and kind of fit them in to the current storyline that's going on. So great stuff as always from Saga. As so many of us always say, and I say it as well, an average issue of the Saga is always still a great issue. You're always going to get solid storytelling from Vaughan and some great art from Fiona Staples. Talking about great art, we've got Matt Kint with the latest artist on here, which is Clayton Crane. It's XMen of War, issue number 7, and it's the part of the new storyline Emperor. And we kind of left off, it's kind of an addition to the storyline. We've had this army that's been, you know, charging through this world, taking over territory by territory, and increasing its army size by taking on the population of who they take over. But now they've kind of thrown in this alien race. Sorry about that. A little bit of a race car going across the road. They've introduced this this alien race that is just going to totally decimate the world, but it's up to our main hero Arik to not necessarily get them on his side, but almost to kind of take over them, to bring them into this kind of rebellion fold, because he realises now, after fighting for the Emperor for so long, that he's actually a bad man, and not that there wasn't an inkling, but people are being played off, you know, populations, races and tribes are being played off from each other, and Arik is going to put a stop to this, and if he has to use this alien race at the same time, then he will. And it's got this great kind of narrative going through it all, a narrator in the background telling the kind of, it's almost like a storytelling of this is the time when people will remember when this happened, when Arik the Great, whatever, kind of took down the Emperor, but at what cost, and those kind of, it just gives it this great kind of cinematic feel, which is just fantastic, and has always suited this book, which just feels real larger than life. I don't know how much longer this has gone. I'm guessing it's kind of like a maxi series. It may finish, I don't know, maybe about 12 issues of this, but just great stuff. And Clayton Crane, again, Matt Kint picked some really great artists, and it doesn't feel so different from the last artist, which is to this book's benefit. There isn't a big jolt at, oh crikey, this is so different from the last stuff. There are elements, you can see the style of the latest artist being there, but it still feels at least similar to the previous arc and the previous arc from those creators too. But I've loved this series. Great job done by Matt Kent. If you've not been picking up XMen of War, I suggest finding out how many issues there is of this and maybe just picking it up in trade rather than trying to find the last 6 issues and then jumping on. But it is a beautiful book, both in storytelling and art. Let's have a look at issue 9 of the Commandy Challenge, which is quite an exciting issue, because it's not only written by Tom King, who seems to be the flavourer of the past few months, with lots of other DC titles he's doing, but it's got the Turtles, Eastman, on art, and this was a very, very different book, and quite frankly it was a very good issue, a much darker tone. While this has kind of meant to have been, I'm going to say, more of a homage, a tribute to Kirby, and you have had artists and writers in past issues not aping the art, but trying to keep in with that kind of Kirby-esque style. Eastman clearly has gone the complete opposite direction, while obviously keeping in the character of Commandy. This is Eastman art. For those of you who have seen it, for those of you who have been used to Kevin Eastman's art style, you will know what to expect, and it's all in this glorious kind of black and white art style, which is so highly detailed in places. But it was the story by Tom King, which it was interesting, because I didn't quite remember how the last issue left and what was the cliffhanger for Tom King to try and resolve. And it wasn't for a while that I thought, Tom's actually forgotten to kind of wrap up what happened in the last issue, but through a great kind of almost recap of every single thing that happened to Commandy since issue 1, that I realised, oh yes, he fell through this kind of dimension hole, and now he's being held captive in this kind of cave prison with a lot of the kind of anthropomorphic animals, and they're being taken away one by one. But it's the futility versus the hope that is in this book that is just so well done and so passionately conveyed by Tom King, as we have Commandy, who is obviously not going to have this being held in in this cave, in this prison, and wants to escape. And every time their captor comes in to take another one away, he attacks it. He tries to bring it down, to no avail. And we're not just talking about 1 or 2 days. We're talking about hundreds of days being held captive in here, and it's just so. Like I said, there's a futility to it, but Commandy will not give up. He hopes that one day his attack will bring down his captor, and it does just feel futile. And as less and less people are left in, and Commandy is just like, well, you know, it's kind of like, why is he not taking Commandy? Just kind of get rid of him. He attacks this captor every day. Why is he not being taken? And it's almost as though he's being left till the last, which indeed he is. We see on the kind of last page him being dragged off, and this prison left empty. The only thing that we don't know about is where this captor is leading them to, and we have a lot of the characters thinking that maybe they're sending them to a better place, which is hopeful, but probably unlikely. But this was just such a fantastic issue, and kind of gives Commandy a kind of new flavour. It's clearly a King Eastman collaboration in showing not a different side of Commandy, but a different way of showing the character. I really enjoyed this. It was a bright light in this Commandy series, which has been somewhat murky over the last few issues. Who is on the next issue? So we've got Greg Pak and I'm going to say Alan Davis, I'm going to guess. But we're getting closer and closer to the end of this with only 3 more issues to go. As again, I think a lot of us have said reading this, this probably won't read very well in a trade because it is so, each story is so insular, despite the fact that it's meant to be telling one big story. Because you could pick up any issue of the Commander Challenge and really not feel that lost, because they, as I said, they are almost one-shots in and of themselves. So I'm hoping whoever we've got to finish these last few issues off address the main story, the kind of overall arc of this maxi series, and we get a adequate, if not better, conclusion to this maxi series. Now I'm down to the last 2 books. So what has just been pipped at the post to become pick of the week. For those of you who watched my Wednesday's video, you could have an inkling of what 2 books are left. So the one that just missed out on being pick of the week was the big tune that was Marvel Legacy, this big one-shot that kicks off, I guess, a new era of Marvel, where we're going to see the return of the kind of old school brigade of the Marvel Universe. Now, it's going to be difficult for me to review this. One, because it was so big. It's a huge issue with so many. It's probably more than a double-sized issue, and there is so much going on in it, and I'll probably miss out a great deal. But the feeling I got from it was that this was the start of something incredibly interesting. And while I've kind of read bits and bobs on the internet that this felt like DC's version of Rebirth, but without the heart in it. And in some respects, having read Rebirth myself, I can kind of get that. There was a lot more kind of emotional resonance to the DC Rebirth one-shot. But here, and again, this is what I've seen in a lot of kind of people's reviews online, this felt more like a previews issue for all the upcoming titles that are going to get kind of bolt into this Legacy huge event. However, saying all that, I had a really great time with it. It was so entertaining, and it did feel kind of Marvel back to form. Not that any of the real Marvel titles that I'm reading I'm particularly disappointed with. I know there seems to be some sort of backlash with Marvel because of the characters and how they're being used, and these legacy characters being taken over by whatever, whether they're female, people of colour, whatever. It doesn't care. I don't care about that. It's if that person who's writing it, who's drawing it, can tell a good story with that character and make me look at it and go, ooh, that's pretty. It's a comic book. Stop getting so angry about a comic book. I just don't get it. Enjoy it for what it is. It's an entertainment vessel. That's all it is. If you're not being entertained with it, don't buy it. Just don't complain about it. Let the people who enjoy it. If not many people buy it, then it'll go back eventually, which is what this is kind of, I think, doing. But there is so much going on in here. It's crazy. There are so many characters, and I'm guessing that I'm missing a lot because I don't read a great deal of Marvel titles. I wish I was. And maybe the upcoming legacy titles that are coming up I may take a little punt at. But some of the more exciting things out of legacy for me, the number one being the potential return of Fantastic Four, as we saw Valeria and Franklin in that kind of pocket dimension that they made for themselves at the end of the Secret Wars event, I want to say last year. It feels like it's longer ago, but it probably was just last year. And kind of Valeria's longing, by the looks of it, to come back to the Marvel regular universe. But there's stuff with the Celestials in here. There's characters that I'm not really familiar with, like Starbrand. Ghost Rider seems to have a big place in here. He's a character that I've always been interested in, but never really collected. This current iteration of the Ghost Rider, I have no idea who it is and what their kind of power set is alongside the Ghost Rider now. But of course you've got the missing Tony Stark, who's been in a coma but suddenly disappears from a kind of SHIELD facility. You've got Loki in there with Frost Giants and his kind of, is he being a good guy, bad guy type of deal. There are so many artists on here, which is part of the course for a book of this size. You would never have got one artist doing all of this. I'm just kind of flicking through this book now, trying to find bits that I've missed. I mean, it's so full of action. You've got the kind of latest iterations of Thor with Jane Foster. You've got Ironheart in place of Iron Man, and you've got Sam Wilson, who has given up the mantle of Captain America now that the real Steve Rogers is back. But none of the artists, when you kind of jump in and out, there isn't that great kind of jolt of it being a different artist, and it all just feels very it flows really, really well. But it's just so packed with potential new storylines that are clearly going to get picked up in a lot of the other issues that the characters pertain to, which I might miss out on because, you know, I've only got so much amount of money. But as a whole package, it was a thrill run, a roller coaster ride, and I was exhausted by the end of it. But great stuff, but couldn't quite get to number one. Now, why was that? Now, my pick of the week this week, it's a book that does have quite a sporadic solicitation, but when it does appear, it blows me away. It's so good, and I'm glad actually that it doesn't come out that often, because I just know that the artist and the writer are putting their all into it to make sure every issue that comes out is their finest, their best work. I am, of course, talking about The Black Monday Murders, issue number 7. This was phenomenal. Oh my god, I love this, and took such an unexpected kind of route, as we for the most part we follow this professor and the detective, which are kind of paired up, and they are coming basically to, I guess, the Lion's Den, as they want questions answered, obviously, not least from the detective about the murders that have been going on. But there is more to this than meets the eye, and we have the professor, who seems to know more than he's currently been letting on, and there are what he feels like are rituals, and it's also almost kind of like Masonic, where they have almost like a secret handshake, but you've got coins, which are these ancient coins, and they've got these sayings, these verses that they have to say, but it's not without its humour, because he gives this big kind of ode poem as a kind of introduction that he knows, you know, what is meant to be said. But the kind of receptionist, she's like, we don't actually do that anymore, you know, times have changed, but I know you're the real deal. And you think you're going to go into this just like an office of this kind of White House presidential home. But no, we're going to go deep down to the depths, but it's who we're going to meet. We already know there is this kind of dark cabal. It's almost satanic. We're talking about gods of greed and finance and money and all that. It's not without its what some people may say this is filler, but I just think it's kind of an interesting way to tell a story. We have these kind of pages of an email trail between two people, and it just makes this book more interesting, and it's not just so stated on the I don't know, what am I trying to say? It just makes the book more interesting to read rather than just panel after panel after panel. And for the most part, you would be surprised because a lot of this is talking. It's talking heads. But Tom Coker and Jonathan Hickman have this way of making this very exciting read. And while we get sort of these crazy kind of guardians to the doors of wherever they're going to, or we're having the conversations between the kind of other groups and who's backstabbing who. It just never feels slow. It just really flows really well, and it isn't until we get to the page where they get to where they're going, and we have the god Mammon. All hail god Mammon, who is this kind of god of, you know, power and money, and because he's brought the right kind of coins, he is allowed a certain amount of time to ask questions, and it reminded me a great deal of the Sandman when he was speaking to the Hecate, where he's asking them questions, but their answers are so cryptic that you don't really get the answer that you were looking for. You really need to ask, you know, a straightforward question that can only possibly have one answer for them to give you that answer that you actually want. It just had that kind of feel to it, and it was chilling. It really kind of drew me into this totally macabre scene. But our professor needs to know more, despite the fact that his time is up, and he basically ends up getting the answers he might want, but at the expense of his life. It's just so good a story, and again, Hickman does really well in fitting in the kind of real life financial events that have happened, these stock market drops, and weaving in the kind of occult supernatural part of it, where they have been pulling the strings on the financial world, both internationally and worldwide, apart from this one moment. And that's the kind of the big twist of this issue, that there was an event of a stock market drop that Mammon did not orchestrate or organise. And that is obviously what we're going to be looking at next. What is this big twist? Just fantastic. Love this book. You need to be getting this. Has there been a trade for this out? I would guess so. Or maybe, 6 issues is usually a trade, isn't it? So we might already have had one. But seek these out because you will not be disappointed. Great work by Hickman, great work by Tom Coker on art on this. Just a great overall package which has not disappointed me. And even if I have to wait another 2 or 3 months, I don't mind. It'll still be a great comic book. And that's it for this week. Thank you all for watching and listening to me ramble on. Please let me know in the comments section box what you thought of the books that I picked up this week. I will listen to all arguments comments if you agree or disagree with me. But until next time, I'll see you on Wednesday with a new set of books. Give this video a big thumbs up if you liked it. Hit subscribe if you want to see more of these. And I will see you very soon. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.